press conference, I mentioned that our priorities during this session were economic development, K-12 education reform, transportation, and crafting a smarter state budget and a smarter state government. And I think we've passed legislation that fits this agenda. We're working to improve Virginia's already great business climate and have come through with some workforce development issues and ideas, and we're making sure that we have the well-trained workers that can meet the needs of our Commonwealth. We've advanced the governor's K-12 agenda as a really very significant agenda. Reward teachers, encourage creativity in the classroom, and give each of our children, all the children, every child in Virginia, a chance and opportunity to succeed. On the House side, we passed comprehensive transportation funding plan. It's over in the Senate. We'll talk a little bit more about that, I'm sure, before the session's over. We continue to focus on making our government smarter, more effective, more efficient, reducing regulation, cutting red tape, and being a wise steward of the taxpayers. We proposed, I think, a conservative but a responsible state budget that makes targeted investments in our key areas of need. It's a budget that I think we can be proud of. We've been working already with the senators on their amendments, and I think we're in pretty good shape in that time. What I'm going to do now is turn it over to our majority leader, Delegate Kirk Cox, who has really been the point man on a lot of things, but on the K-12 reform issues. And I want him to talk specifically about that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about K-12 a little bit today. I'm going to make a point that I don't think a lot of people sort of focused on, and that is over the last 2 or 3 years, we have really tried to put money in the classroom. I know you hear speeches that, you know, about cuts to K-12, but I want to remind you of 2 things a lot of people I don't think focus on, and that is 2 of the major cuts in K-12. These come to about $1 billion. One of them was proposed by Governor Kane, but we agreed to it, and it was basically putting a cap on support personnel. And so in other words, you had 4 instructional personnel for every 1 support personnel. People forget that we were growing our support staffs a lot faster than our instructional staff. The other one that saved about $250 million was a policy change that basically said we were going to reflect the actual participation in healthcare plans, and that's what we were going to fund you for. To give you a quick example, I always got my health insurance from the state, but actually we were refunding 100% to teachers if they participate in our plan or not. So that was a tremendous savings. Think what we did with that money the last few years. 2% across the board pay raise for teachers, and we extended that to the support personnel. So the ones that we have that are invaluable, we're funding. Strategic compensation, which I think is the wave of the future. And that is there's $7.5 million in the House budget for basically this plan that teachers helped develop. And that's why it's got the stakeholder language in there. But basically I think it's the wave of the future. It's actually going to measure teachers on student growth and some other things like mentoring, so that's great. Cost of competing, which of course has been an interesting issue, but we actually put $6 million in the budget for cost of competing. So those are some of the things I think that are very, very key. You've heard this many times, but the beauty of the governor's agenda on K-12 is it makes teachers number one, but it does other things. It's got a big reform component to it. A through F, which you've heard a lot about, certainly developed in Florida, basically giving schools report cards. And I sort of laughed, some of the groups that opposed it gave me a report card, either A or F. But some of them, well, I think you got one group, well, no. But I got several A's, Mr. Speaker, a few C's, but generally I did pretty well. But that's a common sense approach, I think, to really engage parents. Opportunity school districts, you've heard a lot about that lately. But basically what they would do is if you're a school that was not accredited for 2 years, basically the Opportunity School District would take over that particular school. But now I've been in the situation in my teaching career that I've been in 1 or 2 of those schools, and this was 30 years ago. And 30 years is enough time to turn around a school. And so I think that's a very essential component. It will really help schools. And then we have things, you know the list, Teach for America, which I'm very excited about, to take some of our best graduates, the top 5 and 10% of the class, and allow them to get into hard-to-staff schools in Virginia. That's got, I think, universal acclaim. So that's a very big one. We have an actual bill on strategic compensation. We have what we call sort of the Red Tape Flexibility Act, which allows school systems to sort of move personnel around and go to their hardest staffed schools, and they've been really begging for that type of thing. So there's a whole host of things in K-12 that both have a reform component and also a pay component that I'm very proud of. I mean, generally, if your batting average down in the General Assembly is around 50 or 60%, that's pretty good. I would say of the K-12 bills, we're probably, you know, ahead of 90%. So it's been a very successful agenda. A lot of them have passed both sides, so I'm excited what's going to do for K-12.
Thank you, Kirk. I'm next going to ask Delegate Sherwood if she can talk a little bit about school safety.
Thank you. A lot of good news on the school front, needless to say. Over the past several months, there has been intense political discussion and debate over gun laws, our mental health policies, and school safety. We've heard a lot of ideas out there. Some of them have been helpful, some of them have not. School safety, we can all agree, is an important issue. There is nothing more important than our children and their future, and they deserve a safe and secure learning environment. That's why we have proposed responsible and real solutions that make our communities stronger and safer. Our budget includes $31 million in funding for school security. It includes $1.7 million in funding for the School Resource Officer Grant Initiative. School resource officers are integral parts of our school community, and this program has helped put school resource officers in 80% of our high schools and middle schools. We want to expand this very successful program in our elementary schools. It also includes $30 million for security infrastructure improvements, so our schools can purchase automatic locks, cameras, buzz-in systems, and other necessary upgrades to make our classrooms and hallways safer. These are important steps. These are real steps. They will make our children safer and make our communities stronger. We have really been able to maximize what has been a very successful program in our school resource officers. And rather than reinventing the wheel, we know that these are the programs that work, and we have made investments in all of those programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. Tim Hugo now is going to talk about some of the work that we've done on workforce development and economic growth.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the speaker's leadership on this. And one of the things that I think when we got together early, and I'm on Commerce and Labor, Finance, and in-house leadership, got an opportunity to take the speaker's leadership and all of our colleagues to focus on three things. And early on they said focus on jobs, jobs, and jobs. And I think what we really have done, whether it's economic development or issues on workforce development, if you look at Northern Virginia, we included $2.5 million to create a cyber accelerator in Northern Virginia. We've increased the capital angel investor tax credit to encourage investments in startups. We passed House Bill 1699 to create a local tax classification for equipment using data centers. If anybody's ever toured a data center, and I see Delby Greason in the back, many of them are in his district. These are huge endeavors, highly intensive, capital intensive, and they really, I know there's one in his district, Visa, really runs a lot of what happens in our commerce in the whole country. And we are trying to attract more of those to Northern Virginia and to the Commonwealth. I think with that bill we will. If you look at Delegate Ramadan's House Bill 2101, which establishes high school to work partnerships, Watson has done a bill, what we'll do is establish an individual corporate income tax credit for businesses that donate machinery and equipment to Virginia's community colleges. And Byron has got a Virginia Workforce Council to include workforce development issues. And lastly, we're working on entrepreneurs. If you look, there's a lot of big businesses, but a lot of what you see in the Commonwealth are small businesses, startups, entrepreneurs who are working their way up. If you look at House Bill 1760 from Ramadan, it'll make it easier for entrepreneurs to file and start their businesses. Little things like that just to help them get in across that initial threshold. And then Michael Weaver protects home-based businesses located in homeowners associations. It's amazing if you look, a majority of many of the homes in Virginia are now governed by homeowners associations, and if you don't allow those small startups to work out of their home to get going initially, they'll never make it. Because a lot of these homeowners associations are in many ways dictatorial. If anybody saw the Washington Post over the weekend and the big fight that one local homeowner had with his association, that bankrupted the association, cost them hundreds of thousands. Again, what we're trying to do, whether it's Commerce and Labor, Finance, Leadership, General Laws, all the committees that have jurisdiction, we are focusing on three things: jobs, jobs, jobs. With that, one other issue that I know has been of critical importance is tort reform, and I think the speaker turned this out. There you go. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And as Delegate Hugo said, the economy and the jobs are very important to us, and are most important during this session, and we've been focusing on that primarily as we move forward. The House of Delegates has worked very closely with Governor McDonnell to make Virginia the best state in the nation, and we've created a pro-growth jobs environment. And people often talk about government creating jobs when it's really government's job to create the environment in which businesses can create jobs. And tort reform is one of those areas where we can actually assist a business in enabling them to create jobs. And one of the areas in the bottom line for a business can be seriously affected in the courtroom. And a lot of people don't realize that unless you're a small business owner or business owner, you know that the courtroom can be very expensive. This year we passed a 6-bill tort reform package that will reduce costly and unnecessary lawsuits, streamline the litigation process, protect the integrity of the tort system, and reduce legal costs for businesses. The first bill, one of them was from Delegate Todd Gilbert, House Bill 1618, which will reduce forum shopping. Basically, right now, as we stand here today, somebody can be hurt in Terry Kilgore's district and literally sue somebody in Virginia Beach. This bill will narrow that down so that it's harder for some plaintiffs' attorneys or plaintiffs to do some forum shopping to try to get their case into a more friendlier jurisdiction. Next, we have House Bill 1708, which limits the use or allows for some summary judgments to be given off of depositions on punitive matters. I want to thank Delegate Head for bringing this bill forward in the last couple of years and being a true leader in notifying us that this actually needed to change. And I want to thank Delegate Habib for carrying the ball over the finish line when time was necessary. We have House Bill 1709, which specifies which party is responsible for legal costs during non-suit. We have some issues right now as to whether and when a non-suit's taking, which case or which party would pay for those case costs. This will clarify when a non-suit's taken, who will be responsible. We have House Bill 2004, which strengthens Virginia's property trespass law. I want to thank Delegate Clyde for that. Basically, what we did there is we codified common law, which any of you who ever go sit through courts, and I'm sorry if you do, but if you sit through courts, you'll know that it's very difficult to codify common law because it's all case specific, and we were able to do that there. We also have House Bill 1477, brought to us by Chairman Albo, which also codifies the dead man statute. I had a bill, 1545, just passed out of Senate courts today, that makes it better for medical malpractice cases. When a plaintiff's attorney submits their expert designation, it allows the court to look into that designation to ensure that it is proper. It's a really key, complicated piece of legislation. They really are, and I would implore you all to talk to the patrons of those bills so you can get into the nuances of those. But the business, the medical, and legal communities all came together to work on a package that will make our tort reform system more fair for everyone involved. This package will make Virginia more business friendly, and you know, businesses actually really do care about that stuff. So now at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Delegate Jones to talk about a small issue in the budget.
Thanks, Al. Well, good morning. Thanks for coming out today. Just wanted to follow up on what's been said by my colleagues. Of course, the budget seems to work its way through almost every aspect of our life, and from K-12, public safety, economic development and jobs, and tort reform. When the governor introduced his amendments back in December, I thought that he had done a very good job listening to what both money committees had mentioned to him last year. Took a very conservative approach given the economy and where we are, the threat of sequestration looming on the horizon. And so he introduced his amendments back in December. When we got here in January, the chairman of appropriations felt very strongly that we, conferees, and the chairman of the committee sit down, subcommittees I should say, sit down and try to work through the budget section by section by section. And that's what we did. And I'm pleased to say that while we will adjourn Saturday week, the Senate and the House conferees and just subcommittee chairman have been meeting, Kirk, for the last 2 weeks. And we have pretty much agreed on the capital outlay process, what's included in there. We've worked on the number of ID and DD waivers. We've worked on compensation issues. So I feel like we put ourselves in a position to be very successful in conference taken a lot of the big issues, off the table, in the beginning. We're gonna open up the Grayson Prison probably 3 months earlier than the governor had anticipated, which we think makes sense. And we worked very hard to provide, I think, needed dollars to deal with the salary compression issue for a lot of our state employees who've been here for many, many years. We still have the threat of sequestration. If you live down in our area or up in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads in Northern Virginia area, you know what's occurring right now. They are sending out notices. I think you might have seen them this past weekend. It's delayed the work on the Lincoln, I believe it is, and Carrier. And so we're rightly concerned about what the impact is going to be on our economy. So we took a very cautious approach. We put more money to the rainy day fund, and we worked very hard to make sure that we are putting the dollars where they do the best work for us, so that our state employees, our teachers know that they are the most valuable part of what we do because they deliver the services to our constituents. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have about the budget, or any of the other members standing up who will be glad to answer any questions that you might have just in general about the first half of our session, which I think has been a very successful one. Mr. Speaker?
Thank you. Any questions? Shelley?
Well, I think on budget, the elephant in the room that isn't on your list of things that are big ticket items and out of the way is Medicaid expansion. Obviously, the Senate budget would like to do that. I'm going to get the impression that you guys don't want to. Where is that going to go?
Well, I think that the Senate amendment spoke to reform, and I think they shall have the authority to. And I feel what will occur in conference is that we have already met once on it. We met about a week or so ago. We've already had some preliminary discussions, and I think it's universal that we need to have reforms first. And then what is our pathway to get to expansion, if in fact we do it, is what's going to be the issue at hand. And I'm confident at the end of the day, reforms will be what we deal with first. And then if we need to, we can certainly come back later during the year to deal with any issue on the topic of expansion of Medicaid.
What are the biggest outstanding differences between what you want to do and what the Senate passed the other day?
Basically, well, Medicaid, they shall have the authority to seek, and they still have to go, as I understand from their language, to go to the governor. What we state is that they may ask us, to seek and get the reforms, but we shall provide the authority to expand. So that's the major difference. Some say it's nuanced, but we all want to have reforms first, because I think anybody that looks at our Medicaid program today, it is broken. We've got to be more like the managed care world and have more cost sharing. We've got to have more input, more healthy, the wellness component to the Medicaid program that we have. And I think that's all 140 want to do. And I'm confident we will get out of here in time. We've laid the groundwork to do that on many fronts, and I think that will occur.
Dr. O'Bannon's been real involved in this as well, too. You may want to direct some of your questions to both of these guys. You're raising your hand again.
I wanted to shift the transportation.
Oh, okay.
Nobody really talked about that here. Since
We fixed it. It's all done.
Since last week, there was something of a thawing of animosities, thanks in part to your ruling, thanks in part to some compromises made between Democrats, Republicans, and the Senate on that case. But now, Dick Sasswell says, look, we think we can reach a transportation deal with the House. Where does it stand? Who's negotiating what? And what are the biggest obstacles between what they see and what you see?
I don't know if we have enough time to get into all that, but to get into strategy number one.
We'll do that in 3 minutes.
To answer your question, I would agree with Dick. I think that we can get something done. I think there's got to be a realization on all parties, in other words, House, Senate, R's and D's, that this is an issue that we've got to address, and I think that we will. I am confident that when the conferees are appointed, that we will get right to work, and we will hopefully have something, before the end of, not Friday, Saturday, but hopefully sometime mid next week, that we could then bring forward for discussion.
I think, and
That's all.
Bob, we're going to have to go in a minute because we got caucus, but I would like to follow up on that and say, that's a good example of the difference between Richmond and Washington. We can work together on a lot of these ideas. We can move good reform issues through and good transportation initiatives, whatever it may be. We can work together in many cases.
Is the governor going to have to accept some sort of gas tax in the end on his transportation?
I think what comes out of the conference committee, is gonna be somewhat different than what goes in, and, that could be a change, but it's not a question of the governor having to accept. The governor wants to see a good plan come out just as each of us do. One last question? Yeah.
For the for the A to F grading scale, I know in the state of Florida, when they switched to the system, they were able to be taxed or exempt from a lot of the No Child Left Behind exemptions. Is that something Virginia is hoping for?
Delegate Grayson, carried that bill.
He did A through
Would
F.
you like to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Right now, we're not contemplating any exemptions from the federal standards. We're using the same accreditation system that we have today. We're just getting rid of cumbersome names like accreditation with warning, priority schools, fully accredited, and using terms that parents and teachers can understand, A through F. So at this step, we're not changing any of the underlying accreditation scales.
Thank you all very much. We'll be back.